Hi everyone, welcome back. My name's Miss Lewis and I'm a special education teacher from Salem, Oregon. And this is my Adventures of Hugo Cabret playlist. I'm reading one of the chapters out of chapter 2 out of part 1 of Hugo Cabret by Brian Selznick. And we're reading this with permission from Scholastic. So if you didn't tune into the last chapter 1 video, you can find that on the playlist. It's linked below. But this is a segment that I was doing with some of my students before our school closed, and so we're starting over again on YouTube. And in this segment, we go chapter by chapter. We talk about vocabulary and comprehension questions and inference questions, inferring things in the book, talking about figurative language, and continue to analyze the story as we go further. So I am reading chapter 2 out of part 1. And let's talk about the vocabulary that first of all that we're going to see in chapter 2. And the chapter 2 title of the chapter is called The Clocks. So the first vocabulary word that that I need to let you know that you might not know what it means in the book is illumination. Now, illumination is basically just lighting something up. It has more than one meaning, but that's the meaning of the context in the book. It basically is kind of the intensity of light falling on an object. Rickety is something that's put together really poorly and likely to collapse. Like if you put together a table not very well and you put something on it, it kind of shimmies around, it's kind of rickety. Accumulating is another one. Accumulating is kind of gathering together a bunch of things, an increasing number of things. Like I told my students, Miss Lewis accumulates a whole bunch of sparkly gel pens. So it's accumulating. Diligently. It's doing something in a way that you show that you have a kind of care and conscientiousness. You're diligently reading the book. And mechanism. And we're going to talk about that when we're done with the chapter. A mechanism is a system of parts working together inside a machine, like a piece of machinery. Okay, and we'll talk about that. We'll read about that and then we'll talk about that at the end. All right, so this is chapter 2, The Clocks. Okay. Hugo ran down the hallway and disappeared back inside the metal vent in the wall. He paused for a moment. The air was cool and damp. A few dim light bulbs provided a tiny bit of illumination. There's one of our words. Inside the dark passageways. So here's one of our great illustrations in the book. And another of the passageway, the hallway. Another one. I guess that's Hugo's shoe and his shoelaces untied. And a couple more. He's climbing up a spiral staircase. He's just really going around a lot, getting around a lot back there. All kinds of passageways. And he comes to a door. Hugo opened the door and let himself inside. Above the ceiling of the main waiting area was a cluster of secret apartments that had been built for people who ran the train station years ago. Most of them had been abandoned. Only one was still in use. Some sunlight filtered through the dirty skylight. Hugo looked at the rows of jars filled with pieces of all the toys he had stolen from the toy booth over the past few months. The jars sat on shelves made of scavenged planks he found inside the walls of the station. Under his rickety bed, is another one, lay a pile of Hugo's drawings. His deck of cards rested on a dusty trunk in the middle of the room. Nearby, on a small table, was a stack of envelopes, his uncle's uncashed paychecks accumulating week by week. Hugo wiped his eyes and picked up his bucket of tools. He stuffed some more matches and candles into his pockets and set to work. As usual, Hugo headed first to the big glass clocks on the roof because they were the hardest to reach. They were like huge round windows and looked out over the city. one facing north and one facing south. Hugo had to climb up the long, dark staircase and slither through an opening in the ceiling at the top of the ladder to get inside them. During the day, his eyes always stung for a few minutes from the flood of light through the glass. The motors and gears of these clocks were the biggest in the station, and Hugo was often afraid his hand was going to get caught. In the corner of the room, attached by ropes, hung huge weights that kept the clocks running. He checked the time on the glass clocks against the time on his uncle's railroad watch, which he kept with his tools and wound diligently every morning. He then took a moment to carefully look the whole mechanism over and added a few drops of oil to each gear shaft from his little oil can in his kit. Hugo's head tilted slightly to the side as he listened to the beat of the clock, waiting until he was sure the machine was running correctly. Once he had finished with the clocks on the roof, he climbed down the ladder and the long staircase. Back inside the dark passageways, he checked the other clocks in the station, all of which were made of brass and could be maintained from inside the walls. Hugo lit his candles to help him see and began with the clock that overlooked the ticket booths. This clock, like all the others, had weights too, but much smaller ones which disappeared into the floor. Hugo attached a crank to the back of the clock and, using all his strength, turned it as far as he could. Hugo then made sure the gears and levers were moving accurately, and he checked that the time was correct on the miniature dial built into the back of the clockworks. Next, he moved through the hidden passageways to the ring of clocks around the train platforms, and then to the backs of the smaller clocks that faced the interior offices, including the station inspectors. Looking through the numbers, Hugo could see the station inspector's desk. Remember last time we determined that the station inspector was like the police officer of the train station. And in the corner of the office, a cage of a small jail cell that sat waiting for any criminals caught in the station. Hugo had seen men and women locked up in there, and a few times they even had boys no older than himself in the cell, their eyes red from crying. Eventually, these people were taken away, and Hugo never saw them again. From the offices, Hugo followed a long, hidden tunnel to the back of the clock opposite the old man's toy booth. You remember the old man from last time? He wished he could avoid this clock, but he knew he couldn't skip any of them. Peering through the numbers, Hugo spied the old man again, alone in his toy booth at the end of the hallway, looking through the pages of Hugo's notebook. Hugo wanted to scream out, but he didn't. He oiled the clock and listened to it carefully. He could tell it wouldn't need to be wound for another day or two, so Hugo kept going until all 27 clocks in the station had been attended to, just the way his uncle had taught him. So, here are our comprehension questions. Where does Hugo live? What job is Hugo performing in the station? And where did he learn to care for the station's clocks? So think about those questions as we just read the story and see if you can answer those. And then the inferring questions, let's see if we can figure out what's going on in the story. Why do you think Hugo has his uncle's paychecks? Why do you think Hugo maintains the clock so carefully? Now think about it. Remember last time we talked about that the story was set in 1931 in Paris. And so in 1931, we didn't have kind of automatic clocks or digital clocks they didn't have those like we do now. So he has to really take care of these clocks every day for them to tell the time correctly. So why do you think he maintains them so carefully though? He is just a boy. He's like kind of like 10 years old. Where could Hugo's uncle be? And what does it tell us about Hugo that he is able to maintain the complex clocks by himself because he is just a boy. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was the word mechanism. And I'm going to show you a really cool thing of a mechanism. This is a mechanism. So as you can see, as one of the cogs turns a couple times, that makes the other one turn. This is a mechanism inside of a clock or a watch. And it can go faster, it can go slower, but the one part of it moving affects another part. And you can see up on the top here, this mechanism is turning, this one is turning, and this one is turning. So all these are working together to make a reaction to have the machine do something. And for this particular machine, it's turning the clock's second hand, and then eventually the minute hand, and then eventually the hour hand. So that is a mechanism. That's our last vocabulary word. So I will see you next time, and we will read chapter 3. Thank you so much.